Today, I'm going to show you what the most cinematic settings are for video on your Canon M50. Let's jump into it. Alright, listen up. I don't choose these videos. I mean, I do, but I don't. You guys seem to like these videos about the Canon M50, so I'm making another one. So yeah, let's just jump into it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to AeroVlogs. Today we're talking about the Canon M50 again, but we're talking about settings. I already did a video about how to get the most cinematic video out of your Canon M50, but now that was kind of in the post-production more so side of things. So today I'm going to be showing you more of the settings and in-camera settings that I used, and so I'm going to show you the most cinematic settings for your Canon M50. All right. Let's jump into it. Alright, now that we're on the Canon M50, I'm going to show you all the settings and walk you through all the most cinematic settings that I found that work best for the Canon M50, so let's just jump into it. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you switch over to manual mode. This way you'll be able to control all your settings and just get a more cinematic image. So that's what we're going with. Make sure you're in manual. And next, set your frame rate. So for the frame rate, we're going to go to 1080p at 24 frames per second. Now, the most cinematic settings, in my opinion, are 4K at 23, 1080p at 23 if you're trying to save some space and get some better autofocus. So yeah, I'm going to go for 1080p 23.98 frames per second, or 1080p at 24 frames per second. That's just going to give you a really cinematic image. That's what you're going to see in Hollywood and those kind of things. Those big productions will use 24 frames per second, so this will give you the most cinematic possible. Then we're going to go into white balance. Just make sure you set your white balance. If you don't set your white balance, it'll be all janky. So, if you're using indoor lighting, then I'd say go over to the custom temperature and set it to whatever the color temperature your light is. So make sure that you know what color your light is. Personally, I use 5600 Kelvin lights. That's just generally the standard for daylight color. So I would go for 5600 Kelvin for the most part. And just make sure you match your colors, and that'll give you most cinematic color out of your Canon M50. Alright, next you want to set your picture profile, and this is pretty important. And most people just leave it on the standard. But make sure you go into neutral, go into info, and turn down your sharpness all the way, turn down your contrast all the way, and your saturation. And now this may sound weird, but this is so that you can do color grading and get the most cinematic image. I know I keep saying that, cinematic image, cinematic, but that's really the point, is to get the most cinematic settings and image out of your Canon M50. It's really all about just fiddling with your camera and getting good colors and getting good motion blur and all the things that make an image cinematic. So after that, you want to go into your focus settings. For the most part, you might just use tracking or this right here. This allows you to press wherever you need to, and it'll just pull focus for you. But we're actually going to go for manual focus. That way you can get a more cinematic focus pull. And now you don't always need to use this. It is nice to have that control, but obviously if you're not comfortable with manual focus, don't worry about it. You don't have to use it. Just, it's there, and it can make it look a little bit more cinematic. Alright, so the next setting we're gonna do is go into your menu and go into your IS settings. This is where you'll be able to digitally stabilize your footage, and I would go on enabled. This allows for just to get those little micro jitters you get with small cameras like the Canon M50. I talked about this in my cinematic video for the Canon M50, so you can go check that out in the corner. But anyways, point being, that is one of the most cinematic settings that really sells that you're not just using a little Canon M50, when in reality you are. Alright, next we're gonna go to the actual basic settings of the camera. That's like your shutter speed, and for shutter speed you almost always, if you can, you want to be double your frame rate. This way you will be able to get the most natural motion blur, and without it, it's gonna look a little choppy and it just won't look cinematic. So make sure to double your frame rate, and since we're using 23.98 frames per second, that would be 1/50, because that is the closest to 1/48. So that is what we're gonna do. And then the only thing left would be aperture and ISO. For aperture, really just depends, but for the most part, leave it as fast as the lens can go. In my case, I'm using the kit lens right now, so f3.5 would be as wide as we can go. That'll give you a more depth of field, and for the most part, that's gonna look more cinematic. All right, the next thing is ISO. Generally on the Canon M50, you wanna stay under like that 400 or 800 mark. Sure, you could easily push it, but for the most part, I like to stay at around 100 to 500. That just gives me the most performance out of my Canon M50. But obviously, if you're indoors, you're gonna wanna be able to crank up your ISO a little bit, but you know, for the most part, you really just have to figure out where that sweet spot is for you. For the most part, I found the sweet spot is like about 200. That just gives me pretty much the best image that the Canon M50 will offer. But make sure you're not always on automatic, because usually, a lot of the times it'll do well, but it's just not quite as dialed in as using actual ISO manual. So there's that. And that's pretty much it for the settings. I know it's not, it's not as difficult as it may seem, but you really don't need a whole lot to get a great image out of the Canon M50. Here's what the footage looks out of the Canon M50 with the out-of-the-box settings. And then here's what the M50 looks like with our new settings. And then here's a little color grade. Here's my vlog settings, if you want to see. And boom, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty cinematic in my opinion. So those are the settings for the Canon M50 that I recommend. The Canon M50 is a powerful camera, and I would 100% recommend it to people who are looking to get into video and vlogging and stuff like that. But even if you're doing some more cinematic style content, it still looks really good. You know, if you pop it in 4K and throw it on a gimbal or a tripod and then just follow some of those settings, it can look really good. So that's kind of the point of this video. It wasn't to really be a huge detailed video, more is just to show that the Canon M50 can look cinematic, and the settings to make it look cinematic are pretty simple. There's no like one hack to make a camera look cinematic that I know of. I mean, there might be something out there. Hello? Anyone? Point being, there's a lot of room for the Canon M50 to grow with you and to grow with many different style of creators, whether you're just, doing basic vlogs, or if you're really trying to dial in your settings and get that cinematic video. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video, guys. If you found any of these settings helpful or anything in this video helpful, then make sure to leave a like on today's video. Also, comment down below if you want to see more videos about the Canon M50. I'm just going to keep putting more out there because you guys seem to like them. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Gotta grab the other camera. Take one of intro. Take two. Alright, time for some settings.